Like what you see here? Then be sure to subscribe to Jaguar 7, an all-new channel focusing on the history of Major League Baseball. Click the card in the upper right corner or the link in the description to subscribe now. And now, on with our feature presentation. December 19th, 1981. We're down in Memorial Stadium in Wichita Falls for the Division I AA National Championship game between Eastern Kentucky and Idaho State. When all was said and done, the Idaho State Bengals prevailed over EKU by a final score of 34-23, pulling off one of the craziest turnarounds in the history of college football. Heck, it might be the craziest turnaround in the history of the sport. This was an Idaho State team that in 1979, 2 years before, was winless and went 0-11. It was a team that from 1976 to 79 went 6-36, winning just 14% of its games. If we extend that to the final two games of 1975, they were 6-38 in their last 44 to end the decade, with a 2-25 record against Big Sky competition. And just 2 years later, straight out of nowhere, they were the national champions. Seriously, do you realize how insane that is? This is like if in 2024, your national champion and the winner of the college football playoff was freaking UMass. And while there were many reasons for Idaho State's success that season, one of them had to be the play of this man right here, their starting quarterback, Mike Machurek. In that national championship, he was firing on all cylinders, to the point where they don't win that game if he's not under center. Despite brutal winds throughout the day that were upwards of 25 miles per hour, that did not stop Machurek from delivering a performance for the ages. Even though Machurek was worried about the conditions and how well he would play in them, saying after the game, the thing we were a little bit concerned about was the wind, he didn't show it, as he went 29 for 44, completing 66% of his passes for 330 yards and 2 touchdowns with no interceptions. If this was the NFL, that comes out to a passer rating of 103.4, which is exceptional for anyone, let alone a quarterback playing in brutal winds in 1981. Thanks to the great play of Machurek in this game and in this season, the Idaho State Bengals, after being winless 2 years ago, and after being the laughingstock of the Big Sky and Division I AA for the second half of the 1970s, were national champions for the first, and to date, the only time in program history. But while you might know about Idaho State's miracle run and how great Machurek was for the Bengals, especially if you were a fan of the team or were closely following the Division I AA landscape at the time, what you might not know is just how close all of this came to never happening in the first place. Seriously, the fact that Machurek was able to play this season and guide the Bengals to greatness was a minor miracle in itself, thanks in part to an injury that almost went horribly wrong, and serves as a cautionary tale to why athletes have it written in their contracts that they are not allowed to participate in any physical activities not relating to their sport. This is one of the quintessential examples of that in college football, and a bullet being dodged. Because this is the story behind what has to be, in the over 120-year history of the Idaho State Bengals football program, the craziest injury in program history. Before I talk about the injury in question, and just how out of nowhere and crazy it was, we need some context to understand just who Mike Machurek was, and how good he was for the Bengals heading into the 1981 season, because it will truly help us to understand the gravity of the situation, and how devastating something like this could have been. After the 1979 season, Idaho State hired Dave Cragthorpe, an assistant coach at BYU, as its new head coach. And one of the first things that Cragthorpe knew that he needed when he arrived at ISU was a quarterback. BYU was known as a passing team, and Cragthorpe wanted to play a similar style at Idaho State, at a time when most teams were predominantly built around running the football. With that, he was able to recruit the man that you've been watching the whole time, Mike Machurek, to come play quarterback for the Bengals. Machurek spent the previous 2 seasons at the JUCO level, playing for San Diego City College. Now, he was trading the beaches of San Diego for the mountains of Pocatello, as he was tasked with trying to make Idaho State's offense respectable. And I cannot overstate just how good Machurek was in 1980 for the Bengals, when they went 6-5, equaling their win total from the previous 4 seasons combined. It was almost as though Machurek was an alien, because Idaho State had never seen anything like him before. Just to give you an idea of how good he was, and how out of nowhere this was, this chart right here shows all of Idaho State's passing leaders in terms of yardage from 1960 to 1979, so the 20 seasons before Machurek arrived on campus in 1980. The all-time single-season leader in passing yardage over that stretch was Tom Lee, who had 1,627 yards in 1971. In 1979, the leading passer was Dirk Cutter, who had 474 yards. Now, let's add Machurek's 1980 season to the mix, and it's like he was playing a different sport. He improved on Idaho State's top quarterback passing output from 1979 by over 500%. No, that is not a misspeak. No, that is not a typo. 500%. That is insane. Machurek was on top of the world, or at the very least, on top of Pocatello. One writer went as far as saying that when Machurek walks the streets of Pocatello, he's treated like a man passing out $1,000 bills. Said Machurek on the energy and the way he was being treated like a hometown hero, they still can't believe it. The turnabout. The boosters and the whole town. You can just feel it. The whole town's really happy. The entire town's a winner now. Machurek was named the Big Sky Newcomer of the Year, and finished second in the voting for the MVP of the conference, only behind Nevada fullback Frank Hawkins, who had 1,719 rushing yards and averaged over 156 yards per game. So yeah, no complaints there with losing out to him. But it was very clear. The expectations for Machurek and company were high in 1981. In just one short season, because of Machurek's arrival, he turned the Bengals from the joke of the state into must-see entertainment. The success of the Bengals in 1981 was dependent on the arm of Mike Machurek. And amazingly enough, it almost didn't happen after an offseason gone horribly, horribly wrong. Because what's one of the top things during the offseason as the head coach that you preach to your players? Do not do anything stupid. Do not do anything that can jeopardize your playing career. There was no need for it. The risk is not worth the reward. Playing in competitive sports is a dumb idea. Don't play in any pickup basketball matches, or go skiing on the black slopes, or anything along those lines, because nothing good can come from that. And sure enough, guess who did not get the memo and did something that would make anyone's skin crawl if it was done today? None other than Mike Machurek. Because Machurek, during the offseason, decided that it would be a good idea to play in a softball league. What could possibly go wrong playing in a softball league where you're running the bases and sliding and whatnot? Oh, a ton. A ton can go wrong. Because on June 30th, 1981, Machurek was standing on first base. How he got on first, whether it was by a walk or by a base hit, I'm not sure. But regardless, when he was off first base and his teammate got up to bat, his teammate hit a ground ball. Time to turn 2. Machurek was running from first to second. The second baseman stepped on the bag. And then, Machurek slid to try and take him out, just as you're taught to do. Take out the second baseman, and make the throw difficult for the second baseman to turn 2 and complete the play at first. And I'm sure you can see where this one is going. Because as Machurek slid, not only was the double play turned, but Machurek landed on the base in pain. As Machurek said, "I took him out, and my foot got caught on top of the base." Everyone on the softball field heard the knee pop. My first thought was, what's wrong with the knee? Just like that, absolute disaster. When you hear the knee pop like that, you expect the worst. And it felt like Machurek's season and possible professional football aspirations and Idaho State's chances of competing this season were dead in the water, all over a softball game. Now, what might seem crazy is that afterwards, Idaho State head coach Dave Crackthorpe wasn't angry or disappointed. In fact, he completely understood why Machurek played softball and why he did what he did, and didn't even impose a ban on his student athletes playing other sports or competing in other athletic endeavors during the off-season. As Crackthorpe said in wake of the scare, "I have a philosophy that might be different when it comes to things like that. I don't think you could put an athlete in a glass cage. He played softball because he's an athlete. I'd rather have him doing that than sitting on a bar stool someplace." Yeah, that's wildly different from what most coaches believe. This is almost like the incident that happened at Colorado a decade and a half later, when prior to a bowl game, the entire team went skiing, and everyone viewed that as crazy because of the massive possibility of someone getting injured. You can learn more about that by clicking the card in the upper right corner. No one got injured during that, but Idaho State did not suffer the same fate, because their starting quarterback and the most popular man in Pocatello had his knee pop, and it looked like Idaho State's season was over before it even began. Or was it? Because somehow, despite the knee popping, this seemed like the absolute best case scenario. Turns out, there was no new damage. This was the re-injuring of a previous injury. So even though Machurek needed to have surgery and was on crutches and whatnot, this wasn't doomsday. As Glenn Alford, the sports information director for Idaho State, said on this, he evidently re-injured a previous injury. I just got done talking with Mike, and he can't remember when the knee was injured before, but evidently, it was. The doctor said that this was not an original injury. There was no ligament damage, and the surgery in Salt Lake City only took 2 hours to complete. Outside of snipping a small piece of cartilage and scraping some bone chips, the surgery wasn't anything too intensive. Coach Crackthorpe said, if Mike had to have a knee injury, this is the one to have because it's the most minor. Machurek was out for a month, and by mid-August, he was throwing again, as though none of this had ever happened. And thank goodness for that, because Machurek was an absolute machine in 1981, carrying Idaho State to their first and only national championship ever. He was named an All-American that season by setting another school record with 3,674 passing yards, which was a single-season record at Idaho State that stood all the way until 2012. He finished the season with a passer rating of 148.8, which was a single-season record that stood all the way until 2018. And despite only playing 2 seasons with the Bengals, as he graduated after 1981, and even got drafted to the NFL, with the Detroit Lions taking him in the 6th round of the 1982 NFL Draft with pick number 154, he ended his career as the all-time leader in Idaho State history in passing attempts, passing completions, passing yards, and touchdown passes. Every record that Idaho State had when it came to quarterbacks, by the time the 1981 season ended, Machurek was the king of the hill in. No questions asked. And to think that none of this, from Machurek's legacy at Idaho State to the team's national championship, happens if Machurek's softball injury turned out to be anything more serious than what it was. Machurek trying to break up that double play almost turned out to be the costliest double play in the history of organized sports. That one play nearly changed Idaho State football and college football forever, and serves as a reminder as to why coaches usually don't let their players participate in other sports. Because when it goes horribly wrong, oh man, as Idaho State almost found out, it can go horribly, horribly wrong. Get your official Jaguar Gear 9 merchandise by going to jj9shop.com, and be sure to like and subscribe, as it really helps the channel out a lot. Join me every Wednesday night where we'll play NFL Trivia for cash prizes at 9 p.m. Eastern over on Twitch. To learn more about the history of college football, subscribe to Jaguar Gator 8. To learn more about the history of Major League Baseball, subscribe to Jaguar Gator 7. Also, special thanks to all of our Patreon supporters for helping out the channel. Your support is greatly appreciated. See how you can become a patron and request future video topics in the description below.